Forget what Hollywood told you. Medieval sex wasn't all about knights and maidens whispering in torchlit castles. In reality, it was a complicated mix of repression, desire, superstition and, surprisingly, a lot of documentation. Tonight, we're going behind closed doors, past confession booths and castle walls, to explore what sex was really like in the Middle Ages. Spoiler, it's not what you think. Sex and the church, love under surveillance. To understand medieval sex, you have to understand the Catholic Church's grip on society. The church was everywhere, in your village, in your head, even in your bedroom. Sex, in the eyes of God's representatives on earth, was a powerful but dangerous force, one that had to be tightly controlled. The official line? Sex was allowed only between a married man and woman, only for the purpose of making babies, and ideally, without enjoying it too much. Yes, pleasure was seen as a slippery slope to sin. There were rules upon rules. You couldn't have sex on holy days or during Lent or while the woman was menstruating or if she was pregnant or if you had just eaten. Positions other than missionary were frowned upon. Sex standing up, sin. Sex at night, questionable. Sex for fun, better pray twice. But, and this is where it gets juicy, people didn't always follow the rules. Confession manuals, medieval sex education. Much of what we know comes from the strange and specific confession manuals that priests used. These weren't general guides to avoiding sin. They were like ancient FAQs about every possible sex act, when it was sinful, and how many years of penance it required. These books are shockingly detailed. They discuss everything from sex during church hours to how many thrusts were considered excessive. Some historians believe these books were less about spiritual guidance and more about an obsessive fascination with controlling people's private lives. One example, a couple caught having sex in the churchyard. Penance, fasting for 40 days. Masturbation, equal sin for men and women, but with different punishments. Oral sex, always a sin. Anal sex, sin plus possible excommunication. You get the picture. Peasants, privacy and practicality. So what was the average person's sex life like? For most medieval peasants, life was short, hard, and busy. Privacy was rare. Families often lived in single-room cottages. If a married couple wanted intimacy, it was either at night with everyone sleeping nearby, or maybe while others were out in the fields. Romantic, right? Beds were made of straw or hay. Clothes were often kept partially on. It was cold after all. Foreplay? Probably quick. For most couples, sex was a practical affair, but even so it could be affectionate, even passionate. One unexpected fact? Premarital sex was common and often tolerated. Couples would enter a sort of trial marriage called handfasting, where they could live together before formalizing things. If the woman became pregnant, a wedding would quickly follow. Nobles' power and politics in the bedroom. For the upper classes, sex was often political. Marriages were arranged for land, alliances, and wealth. Love rarely entered the equation. Consummating a marriage could require witnesses to ensure everything was official. In some royal courts, bedsheets were inspected the morning after to check for blood. Kings and nobles often had mistresses, and affairs were common. These women sometimes held real political power. Take Agnes Sorel, mistress of Charles VII of France. She wasn't just a lover, she influenced court decisions and even fashion. But noble women also faced enormous pressure. Failing to produce an heir could mean disgrace or divorce, and getting caught in an affair, that could mean execution. Sex work and medieval tolerance. Now let's talk about sex workers. Medieval cities often had state-regulated brothels. In London, for example, sex workers had to wear specific clothing and weren't allowed to solicit near churches. Brothels were taxed, inspected, and in some cases provided health checks. This wasn't seen as ideal, but it was accepted as a necessary evil. Better that men go to brothels, the logic went, than seduce married women or nuns. Sex workers came from all walks of life. Widows, abandoned wives, poor young women. For some, it was survival. For others, it was one of the few ways to earn any money at all. Records show some became wealthy and even married into respectable society. But the church and reformers constantly tried to shut down brothels. By the late Middle Ages, many were driven underground. Still, they remained an open secret. Medicine, myths, and madness. Medieval medicine had some wild ideas about sex. Doctors followed the humoral theory, the idea that your body was ruled by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much sex, you'd lose essential fluids. Too little sex, your body would overheat. In women, It was believed that the womb could wander if not satisfied, causing a condition called suffocation of the womb, a mix of anxiety, seizures, and hysteria. The cure? Sex or marriage. Convenient, isn't it? Some texts even advise men on how to improve performance. A medieval guide might suggest wine mixed with spices, or exotic aphrodisiacs like powdered beetles or dried wolf genitalia. We don't recommend it. Fertility was a major concern. Women were often blamed for infertility, and remedies ranged from herbal treatments to prayers to saints. One text suggests placing a roasted hedgehog near the bed. Desperate times. Same-sex relationships and forbidden desires. What about those whose desires didn't fit the mould? The Church officially condemned same-sex acts as unnatural. Penalties ranged from penance to death, depending on region and time period. Yet records show these relationships happened. In monasteries, close same-sex friendships, sometimes romantic, sometimes physical, were not uncommon. Letters and poems between men survive that suggest deep emotional, possibly sexual connections. Female same-sex relationships were often ignored or denied by male clergy, either out of disbelief or convenience. But in some cases, women who lived together long-term or wore male clothing were charged with deviance. Desire was policed, but never truly stopped. Romance, love, and longing. Despite everything, medieval people fell in love, deeply and dramatically. Letters, poetry, and songs from the time are filled with longing, heartbreak, and erotic desire. Courtly love, a kind of chaste yet intense admiration, flourished in the literature of knights and ladies. One famous example? Abelard and Heloise, a teacher and his student who began a passionate affair. When Heloise became pregnant, Abelard arranged a secret marriage. Her family was furious. Abelard was attacked and castrated. They both ended up in religious life, but their letters are full of longing, pain, and love that defied their roles. Not all medieval love was tragic. There are folk tales and church records of ordinary couples who stayed together through war, plague, and famine, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Final thoughts: human, messy, and real. So what was sex really like in the Middle Ages? It was everything. Sacred and sinful, tender and transactional, repressed and rebellious. It was shaped by theology, class, gender, and fear, but also by love, instinct, and desire. Medieval people weren't that different from us. They loved, they cheated, they hoped, they hurt. They wanted connection, they broke the rules, they looked for meaning. The origins of Stoicism and mental clarity. Imagine living in a chaotic world. Political instability, war, economic collapse, and people chasing pleasure while constantly fearing death. That wasn't just ancient history. That was the world of the early Stoics. And strangely enough, it sounds a lot like today. Now picture this. A shipwrecked merchant walks into a bookstore in ancient Athens, broke, lost, and looking for purpose. He picks up a book on Socrates. That moment changes not only his life, but the course of Western philosophy forever. His name was Zeno of Citium, and he would become the founder of Stoicism, the ancient art of keeping your mind steady when the world goes mad. Today, we'll explore how Stoicism began, why it was revolutionary, and how it continues to offer mental clarity and strength in modern times. This isn't just dusty philosophy, this is a survival manual for the soul. The shipwreck that started a revolution. Zeno's journey began with disaster. His ship, full of precious dyes, sank. He landed in Athens with nothing. Desperate and curious, he wandered into a bookshop and read about Socrates. Inspired, he studied under various philosophers, the Cynics, Megarians, and Platonists. But none satisfied him completely. So Zeno did what all great thinkers eventually do. He built his own path. He began teaching under the Stoipoikal, the painted porch, and from that spot, his followers became known as Stoics. The idea was simple, but radical. You cannot control the world, only how you respond to it. What did the Stoics believe? At the heart of Stoicism lies a powerful distinction. What's in your control? Your thoughts, choices, and actions. What's out of your control? Everything else. The weather, politics, death, other people's opinions. If you focus on what's outside your control, you suffer needlessly. If you focus on what's inside your control, you find peace. The Stoics believed that the only true good is virtue, and everything else, health, wealth, fame, comfort, is neither good nor bad. They called these things indifference. They also focused on four cardinal virtues: wisdom, the ability to know what truly matters; courage, the strength to face pain and fear; temperance, self-control over impulses; justice, treating others with fairness and kindness. A Stoic life isn't passive or cold, it's grounded, disciplined, and deeply human. Meet the great Stoics. Epictetus was born a slave and crippled early in life, yet he became one of the most influential Stoic teachers. He taught that freedom isn't external. It's the ability to choose your response in any situation. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Epictetus. He lived simply, owned little, and believed the path to peace was mastering desire and fear. Seneca was a Roman senator, playwright, and tutor to Emperor Nero. He lived among power, danger, and corruption. His writings, like Letters to Lucilius, are filled with guidance on how to live well amidst chaos. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca. He preached preparation for hardship, not by panicking, but by calmly rehearsing it in your mind. And then there's Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and battlefield general. At night, after long days managing war and plague, he wrote to himself in a journal that would later become meditations. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Despite having absolute power, he used Stoicism not to dominate others, but to govern himself. Stoicism in daily life, ancient and modern. The Stoics practiced several daily rituals that we'd now call psychological tools. 1. Morning reflection. What kind of day will this be? What challenges might come? How should I respond? 2. Premeditatio malorum. Imagine worst-case scenarios. Not to worry, to prepare. 3. Evening review. What did I do well? Where did I fail? What can I improve tomorrow? They also practice voluntary discomfort. Fasting, sleeping on hard beds, walking in cold weather. Why? To remind themselves that comfort isn't necessary for happiness. Today, these ideas have influenced cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, modern self-help and leadership philosophies, military and elite athletic training, mindfulness and resilience coaching, billionaires like Tim Ferriss, authors like Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way, and even tech CEOs practice Stoicism. Why? Because it helps you stay calm, focused, and ethical in a chaotic world. The power of control and letting go. Here's the core Stoic exercise. Draw a circle. Inside it, write everything you can control: your actions, your thoughts, your words. Outside it, write everything you can't control: traffic, gossip, illness, death. Now focus only on the inner circle. This mindset frees you from anxiety. You stop chasing perfection. You stop trying to control other people. You stop fearing failure, because even failure, if faced with courage, is a kind of success. The Stoics didn't deny emotion. They simply didn't let emotion rule them. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Epictetus. They believed that peace doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from choosing your response to pain. Stoicism and death. Memento mori. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Stoicism is its obsession with death. But this isn't morbid, it's clarifying. The Stoics practiced memento mori. Remember that you must die. Every day, they reminded themselves that life is short and death inevitable. Why? Because it makes you live fully. If today were your last, would you waste it in anger? In regret? In jealousy? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Rather than fear death, Stoics used it to sharpen their values and focus their time. Final thoughts. The still mind in a stormy world. So what is Stoicism, really? It's not emotionless. It's not cold. It's not about suffering in silence. It's about clarity, discipline, freedom. Freedom not from pain, but from panic. Not from chaos, but from confusion. It's about walking through the fire of life without letting it consume your mind. In a world that's louder, faster, and more anxious than ever, Stoicism is a quiet anchor. It's the strength to say, I cannot control the storm, but I can control how I sail through it. So next time you're stuck in traffic, betrayed by someone, or facing a crisis, remember the painted porch. Remember Zeno. And remember this: the obstacle is the way. Ancient Roman bath culture, more than just a bath. Imagine stepping into a colossal marble building shimmering in the golden afternoon sun. You're surrounded by echoes, the chatter of merchants, the laughter of children, the low hum of political deals being whispered over steam. This isn't a palace, it's a bathhouse, and in ancient Rome, the thermae were more than places to get clean. They were the heartbeat of Roman social life. Welcome to the world of Roman bath culture, an ancient experience that combined hygiene, leisure, politics, fitness, and flirtation in one steamy, echoing hall. Today, we're not just looking at how they bathed, we're diving into how bathing helped build an empire, the architecture of indulgence. Roman baths were gigantic complexes, often funded by emperors looking to win public favour. Take the baths of Caracalla, for instance. They covered 33 acres and could accommodate over 1,500 people at once. We're talking about massive vaulted ceilings, mosaics, columns, statues, gardens, libraries, even art galleries. But these weren't just for show. They served a very real, very daily function. Romans, rich or poor, bathed almost every day, and in a time before showers or private plumbing, public baths weren't a luxury, they were a necessity. Entry was cheap, sometimes free, and citizens of all classes mingled freely, at least in theory. Men and women bathed at separate times or in different sections, though mixed bathing did exist earlier in Rome's history. The bathing ritual, a step-by-step breakdown. Bathing was a process, not something you did in 5 minutes before heading to work. Apoditerium, the changing room. Slaves or attendants would watch over your clothes. Palestra, the gym. You exercised here first, wrestling, boxing, ball games, or weight training. Tepidarium, a warm room where your body adjusted to the heat. Caldarium, the hot steamy bath. Think of it like a Roman sauna. Frigidarium, a cold plunge pool to refresh and close your pores. You'd be oiled up, massaged, and then scraped down with a striggle, a curved metal tool that removed sweat, dirt, and excess oil. Afterward, you'd relax with wine, snacks, or a good conversation. The entire process could take hours. It wasn't just about hygiene, it was about ritual, relaxation, and reputation. The bathhouse as the Roman social network. In the bathhouse, everyone met everyone. Senators might run into soldiers, merchants talked with poets, political rivals shared space in the steam room. These weren't segregated ivory towers, they were open forums. Deals were made here, friendships formed, enemies plotted. Bathhouses were where influence was exercised, sometimes more effectively than in the Senate. Philosophers like Seneca and Pliny the Younger wrote about their experiences in the baths, sometimes praising the community, sometimes lamenting the noise. I was having a massage in the bath, and all I could hear was the yelling of a muscle man showing off his strength. Pliny the Younger. Even emperors bathed with their people. Hadrian, for instance, was known for walking into the baths unguarded and speaking with citizens. It was a gesture of unity and a display of power. A place of seduction and scandal. Bathhouses weren't all business, they were also places of pleasure and flirtation. Mixed gender bathing was allowed in earlier periods, and even when banned, rules were often ignored. Roman poets and satirists wrote of lovers' trysts, illicit affairs, and even prostitution in the shadows of the steam rooms. The philosopher Musonius Rufus complained that moral decay started in the bathhouses. Early Christians condemned them as places of temptation and sin. Still, the baths continued, with erotic mosaics, flirtatious games, and social rituals that blurred the line between relaxation and indulgence. Cleanliness and science. The Romans didn't just love baths for social reasons, they valued cleanliness. While not sanitary by today's standards, Roman bathing was advanced. They developed complex plumbing systems, aqueducts, and hypocausts, underground furnaces that heated the floors and walls. Water was constantly cycled through giant cisterns. Even the smallest towns had public latrines and fountains fed by aqueducts. The goal? A cleaner, more efficient, and more civilized society. Some bathhouses even included medical facilities, rooms where doctors offered treatments, advice, or surgery. Roman doctors believed in the balance of the humours, and bathing was part of restoring that balance. Bath culture and the Roman identity. For Romans, bathing wasn't optional. It was part of what made them Roman. To not bathe was to be barbaric, dirty, uncultured. Bathing became a civic duty, a mark of citizenship, and a tool for integrating conquered peoples into Roman life. New provinces like Gaul and Britain saw a rise in bathhouses almost immediately after Roman conquest. It was as if the empire was saying, "Welcome to Rome, here's your towel." The decline of bath culture. So what happened? Why don't we have giant public baths today? As Rome's power waned, so did its infrastructure. Aqueducts broke, plumbing collapsed, the economy tanked. By the time of the 5th century invasions, many great bathhouses were abandoned. At the same time, Christianity was rising in influence. While early Christians had used baths, the later church grew wary of nudity, luxury, and moral ambiguity. Bathing became less frequent, and eventually less fashionable. Medieval Europe would forget the public bath almost entirely, and by the time of the Black Death, even private bathing was rare. The Romans had gone from daily steam rooms to superstitious fears of water, the legacy of Roman baths today. Yet Roman bath culture never really disappeared, it evolved. Modern spas, gyms, saunas, and wellness centres all echo Rome's bathhouses. Even our ideas of going to the club, networking in the locker room, or combining leisure with business, all of it comes from the Roman model. And the ruins? They still stand. In Rome, in Tunisia, in Britain, silent, sunlit, and timeless. If you walk through the baths of Diocletian or Caracalla today, you can almost hear the echoes, the steam, the laughter, the ambition. Bath culture was never just about water. It was about identity, unity, and empire. Final thoughts, more than skin deep. So, the next time you take a shower, step into a sauna, or lie in a jacuzzi, remember the Romans. For them, bathing was a daily ritual of renewal, a chance to reflect, connect, and refresh. They understood something we often forget, that taking care of the body is also taking care of the mind and spirit. That community starts with shared space, not just shared ideas. In the ancient baths, Rome wasn't just cleansing itself, it was rebuilding itself, one steamy conversation at a time. Ancient Egyptian medicine, where magic met science 3,000 years before modern medicine, before microscopes, hospitals, or antibiotics. The ancient Egyptians were already treating injuries, diagnosing illnesses, and performing surgery. But here's the twist. They did it with a mix of science, religion, and a little magic. In this episode, we're diving deep into the mysterious and brilliant world of ancient Egyptian medicine, a world where gods were healers, doctors were priests, and the line between spell and prescription was razor thin. If you think ancient medicine was all guesswork, this might just blow your mind. Medicine as a sacred calling. In ancient Egypt, healing wasn't just a job, it was a divine mission. Physicians, known as Thurentin, often trained in temple schools connected to gods like Thoth, god of wisdom, and Sekhmet, goddess of war and healing. The most famous of all was Imhotep, a real-life doctor who was so revered that after his death, he was deified and worshipped as a god of medicine. Egyptians believed that health was a balance, not just of the body, but of the spirit, the cosmos, and the will of the gods. Disease could be caused by natural imbalances, spiritual corruption, or even angry deities. So, treatment needed to address all of those realms. The first medical textbooks. We actually have their textbooks. Ancient Egyptians wrote down their medical knowledge on papyrus scrolls, some of which survive to this day. The Ebers Papyrus, c. 1550 BCE. Over 700 remedies for everything from asthma to hemorrhoids. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, c. 1600 BCE. A surgical manual describing wounds, fractures and dislocations in detail. The Cahun Gynecological Papyrus, c. 1800 BCE, focused on women's reproductive health. These scrolls describe treatments with an astonishing blend of observation and mysticism. They include instructions like, if you examine a wound and the edges are puffy and hot, say, infection. Apply honey to a wound, it kills demons. One phrase you'll find often, do this remedy as a spell is spoken. That's right, nearly every cure came with a ritual chant or magical incantation. Diagnosing the living and the dead, Egyptian doctors were keen observers. They examined the pulse. They knew it reflected the heartbeat, urine, colour, smell and sediment, eyes, skin, stool and tongue. They recognized patterns in symptoms. Some even practiced early forms of diagnostics, feeling for swelling, pressing on organs, and recording the timing of symptoms. But here's where it gets eerie. They also consulted the dead. Mummification taught them human anatomy better than most ancient cultures. While they didn't fully understand organs like the brain, they knew about the liver, lungs, stomach, and heart, and made surgical observations that still hold up today. Surgeries, sutures, and strange tools. Yes, ancient Egyptians performed surgery. Minor procedures included suturing wounds, draining abscesses, treating fractures and dislocations. They used scalpels, forceps, bone saws, and cauterizing irons, all made of bronze or obsidian. But not every tool was medical. Some were symbolic, invoking divine power during healing. For example, certain knives were designed not just to cut, but to banish evil spirits. Pain relief? They had that too. Willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, like aspirin. Opium, imported and used for severe pain. Beer and wine, used to numb pain or calm patients during procedures. Women's health and early family planning. Ancient Egyptian women had access to surprisingly advanced gynecological care. Midwives, female healers, and temple priests offered support in pregnancy, birth control, fertility treatments, childbirth rituals. Contraceptives? Believe it or not, yes. Some included crocodile dung mixed with honey and inserted vaginally. Please don't try this. Acacia gum, which has spermicidal properties. Pregnancy tests involved soaking barley and emmer wheat with a woman's urine. If the grain sprouted, she was likely pregnant. Modern science confirms this method can detect hormonal changes. They even had treatments for labor pain, postpartum infections, and breast milk stimulation, using herbs, oils, and magic. To fully understand Egyptian medicine, you have to accept this. Magic was real to them. They believed that illnesses could be caused by demons, curses, angry ancestors, disharmony between body and soul. So every treatment involved spells, amulets, or rituals. Some examples: a scarab beetle amulet placed on the chest to protect the heart, a spell recited over water before drinking it, prayers to Isis, Horus, or Thoth during surgery. But this wasn't just superstition. These beliefs created a powerful placebo effect, encouraged hope, and built trust between doctor and patient. Hospitals of the afterlife. In Egyptian tombs, we find carvings of doctors tending to patients, even in the afterlife. The belief was that healing didn't stop at death. Pharaohs buried with surgical tools were thought to need them in the next world. Some temples had attached houses of life, early hospital-like spaces where sick people came to sleep near sacred statues, hoping for dreams sent by the gods. This practice was called incubation, and it's eerily similar to modern guided meditation or spiritual healing retreats. Influence on later civilizations. Egyptian medical knowledge travelled far. Greek thinkers like Hippocrates and Galen learned from Egyptian texts. Islamic medicine in the Middle Ages preserved and expanded these ideas. Even early European doctors used Egyptian remedies for centuries. Their influence stretched from Mesopotamia to Rome, and echoes even in modern holistic medicine. Final thoughts. Ancient wisdom for a modern world. So, what can we learn from ancient Egyptian medicine today? Healing is complex. It involves the body, mind, and spirit. Belief matters. The power of ritual and trust can't be underestimated. Observation is everything. The Egyptians didn't just hope for health, they studied it. Balance is key. Their obsession with harmony mirrors modern ideas of homeostasis. Despite the crocodile dung and chants to falcon-headed gods, their system was shockingly logical, compassionate, and in some ways, timeless. Today we separate science and spirituality, but maybe, just maybe, the Egyptians were onto something when they said, to cure the body, one must understand the soul. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and join us next time as we uncover more strange truths from history's forgotten corners.